The case of Juhayman al-Otaybi, who carried out a famous hijacking of al-Masjid al-Haram, is an example of political grievances. Political grievances mixed with a misinterpretation of a hadith pertaining to the end of times. More specifically, the hadith regarding the Mahdi. So Juhayman al-Otaybi, firstly, he was born in the Qasim area, and he was born in 1936. So the details of this on page 44. In Qasim in Najd, and his father was a part of what was known as the Ikhwan. This should not be confused with Ikhwan al-Muslimin, which was founded by Hassan al-Banna, who passed away later in that same period in Egypt, who was in fact assassinated in around 1946. This movement, Ikhwan, is a different group. They rebelled against King Abdul Aziz. They had clashes. The father of Juhayman was from that group. And Juhayman himself, in fact, he joined the Saudi Arabian National Guards, serving from 1955 to 1973. So he has some military background in the Saudi National Guard. Later on, Juhayman al-Otaybi joined a group known as al-Jama'atu al-Salafiyya al-Muhtasiba. And this group was founded by the students of the Salafi Shaykh Nasiruddin al-Albani. And this organization had its funding secured by Abdul Aziz bin Baz. But eventually Juhayman al-Otaybi broke away from this organization and formed his own cult with a few hundred young recruits. What I write on page 45, most of those who knew him, such as religious student Mutawalli Saleh. So this student, he was a part of the Al-Jama'atu Salafiyya Al-Muhtasiba, Mutawalli Saleh. He attests to the force of the personality and the devotion of Juhayman al-Otaybi. So he states, and this is taken from his interviews, which are available, nobody saw this man but liked him. He was strange. He had what is called charisma. So in Arabic, they don't actually have a word for charisma. They actually utilize the English word charisma. He was true to his mission and he gave his whole life to Allah day and night. So what I write, however, for a religious leader, he was poorly educated. So Nasir al-Huzaymi, a close follower, former follower, he recalls regarding Juhayman. He states, Juhayman was keen to go to the isolated and rural areas where Bedouins live because his classical Arabic, Fusha, was weak, and having a strong Bedouin accent, he avoided addressing any educated audience to avoid being exposed. So he was not very educated, Juhayman al-Otaybi. Now, this new group, they deemed the Saudi clergy, the Saudi ulama, as deviated and corrupt because of their allegiance to the Saud royal family. On moving to Riyadh, the group was investigated by Saudi security police, only to be later released. The strange aspect of Juhayman's cult was its association with apocalyptic events, and that is of course why we are covering this particular group. The appearance of the Mahdi and the new Islamic century. So 1979 and the Islamic New Year 1400 coincided. The year 1979 and the new Islamic century of 1400. The interesting part, when he goes to jail, while in custody for suspicious, subversive behavior, Juhayman met a man by the name of Muhammad bin Abdullah al-Qahtani, of whom Juhayman claimed to have had dreams, interpreting them as meaning that al-Qahtani was the promised Mahdi. Somehow, most likely through standard cult mind control and manipulation, Juhayman convinced al-Qahtani that the latter was the Mahdi. Following this misinterpretation of hadith and misguided belief was the misapplication of the hadith regarding the name of the Mahdi being Muhammad and his father being Abdullah, with al-Qahtani also claiming to be from the prophetic lineage known as Sayyid or Sharif. So Qahtani meets Juhayman al-Otaybi in prison. Juhayman al-Otaybi is already a part of a fringe group that has broken away from the main Saudi scholarship. But when he enters jail, he meets Muhammad al-Qahtani, who claims to be a Sharif or a Sayyid from the lineage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Juhayman believes that this man is the man he observed in dreams as being the Mahdi. And then there is also the interpretation of certain hadith. What occurs after that? Conveniently, rumors spread that hundreds of Meccans, people from Mecca, and pilgrims had seen al-Qahtani in their dreams, standing tall in the Grand Mosque, meaning al-Masjid al-Haram, and holding the banner of Islam. Juhayman's followers were convinced. Mutawalli Salih, a member of the Al-Jama'atu Salafiyya al-Muhtasiba group, recalls, "I remember the last meeting when a brother asked me, 'Brother Mutawalli, what do you think about the Mahdi?' I said to him, 'Excuse me, please don't talk about this subject.' Then someone said to me, 'You are a silent devil. Brother, the Mahdi is real, and he is Muhammad bin Abdullah al-Qahtani.'" So already they break away from the mainstream, and what do? They interpret certain dreams as being a specific individual whom they believe to be al-Mahdi, and they ostracize those who disbelieve in this. So what I write on this, on page 46, this esoteric, apocalyptic misinterpretation acted as a trigger for their political motivations and extremism in countering grievances against the Saud family. After a short disappearance into the desert, so Juhayman, after being released, he goes into the desert, where Juhayman and his cult members trained using arms. They had military training, a few hundred of them. They suddenly reappeared on the 1st of Muharram, so straight after the Hajj. After the Hajj is done, you know the Hujjaj, they gather in Mecca al-Mukarramah, in al-Masjid al-Haram. Juhayman al-Otaybi, he reappears. 1st of Muharram is which year? The new year, the new Islamic year. So 1979. To lay siege to the Grand Mosque in Mecca. They had smuggled in armaments and supplies using coffins with the aid of security personnel who were either a part of the cult or who had sympathy for their cause. So there were people who administered some smuggling in of weapons into al-Masjid al-Haram. Then what occurs? Juhayman had convinced his cult members that this act of terrorism, or heroism as they would say, would bring about the epoch of the Mahdi, Armageddon, and re-establishment of the caliphate. Juhayman was also convinced and persuaded others. But remember, what was he persuading them with? He was persuading them with dreams and misinterpretation of the ahadith. Yesterday we covered that this misinterpretation of ahadith or ayatul Quran it falls as a glue, that which binds them to the ideology. That the new Islamic year and century would witness the appearance of the Mahdi as predicted in hadith literature. These delusions continued during the siege, when the group heard that an army was arriving to Mecca to do battle with them. Juhayman interpreted this as the army foretold in the hadith of Salama in Sunan Abi Dawud and others, that they would be dispatched against the Mahdi and subsequently swallowed. Now, what is that? There is a hadith in the Sunan that mentions that an army will head out towards al-Masjid al-Haram. This army will be swallowed in the desert, al-Bayda. Juhayman al-Otaybi had heard that the Saudi security forces were coming in order to remove his group, his terrorist group that had hijacked al-Masjid al-Haram. He interpreted that as being the army that will be dispatched. Has he fallen into a fallacy? The answer is yes. Later we will be covering the fallacies. What fallacies these groups are falling into. One of them is giving citation to a hadith in isolation, without all the ahadith on that particular subject. Another fallacy is quoting the hadith partially, not quoting the entire hadith. So there are many fallacies. One of the fallacies is believing that you are bringing about the events of Ashratu Sa'ah. This is a qadari belief. It is not from the belief of Ahlul Sunnah. So on page 47, I give citation to the BBC report regarding these events that had occurred. What is mentioned is the preacher Khalid al-Yami, a follower of Juhayman, claimed that, and this is in al-Masjid al-Haram, so they bring in the weapons, they remove the imam, they hijack the masjid. In fact, during that time, Shaykh Muhammad Ali al-Sabuni, rahimahullah, the mufassir of the Quran, was in the masjid at that particular time, at Salatul Fajr, and he states he was near the Mount Safa and Marwa, and he found a window, and because his head was small, he was able to fit through the window, and he says this was about the 4th or 5th time his life was saved. But he escaped during that hijacking. So when they hijack al-Masjid al-Haram, what occurs? The follower, Khalid al-Yami, a follower of Juhayman, claimed that countless visions have testified to the coming of the Mahdi. Hundreds of Muslims had seen him in their dreams, al-Yami said, and now he was in their midst. The Mahdi's name was Muhammad bin Abdullah al-Qahtani. Note here how they enforce the interpretation. They claim there are hundreds of dreams. They are utilizing the dreams as a proof, and he is claiming also that the Mahdi has arrived, ignoring all the other signs, because there are so many numerous signs. On page 48, I mention that when this Qahtani was struck by bullets, when he was hit, people started to shout, "The Mahdi is injured, the Mahdi is injured." Some tried to run towards him to rescue him, but the heavy fire prevented them from doing this, and they had to retreat. But Al-Qahtani's belief in his own invulnerability was unfounded, and he was soon struck by gunfire. They told Juhayman that the Mahdi had been hit, but he declared to his followers, "Do not believe them, they are deserters." So at that time, Al-Qahtani actually believed that he was the Mahdi. So what he did, instead of taking cover, because the Saudi government had placed snipers on the minarets and snipers around al-Masjid al-Haram. But instead of taking cover, what did Al-Qahtani do? Al-Qahtani ran around without taking cover, and eventually he was hit numerous times until he died. And then when the followers mentioned this to Juhayman al-Otaybi, Juhayman said, do not believe them. Those followers who are stating this, they are deserters, they are deserting us. So this shows that Juhayman was in some type of denial. Juhayman was in a clear denial of what was occurring. Ultimately, the Saudi forces retook the Grand Mosque in Mecca, and most of Juhayman's cohorts were killed, including al-Qahtani. The survivors were subsequently tried and executed. It is said that Juhayman was remorseful afterwards and spoke to his former teacher, Shaykh Muhammad Amin al-Shinqiti. So Shaykh Muhammad Amin, he talked to Juhayman before Juhayman was executed regarding forgiveness. Perhaps he had awoken from his self-concocted delusion. It seems he had realized he was not actually in the time of al-Mahdi. So what I mentioned regarding that is that mental health and various other psychological and emotional issues play a major role in the motives of zealots who misinterpret religious texts in order to validate their extreme actions. And on page 49, I mentioned some of those gross misinterpretations. One of them I state, the second erroneous belief was the presumption that they themselves could bring about the events of the Mahdi or any foretold prophetic events. Actions performed like this are not by Allah when He wills and ordains is key to the nature of the incorrect beliefs held by such groups. So if you remember, in 2015, around that time, ISIS, they attempted to bar the Euphrates river water to bring about the Euphrates gold. That goes against the creed of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. The events will occur when Allah wills. Humans do not bring about these events. So the next section, which is given the title Cults in Our Midst, covers another cult leader from Turkey, whose name was Adnan Oktar, who famously went under the pen name Harun Yahya. Now, Harun Yahya was born in 1956. He is still currently alive and in jail. Why did he rise to prominence? What I mentioned is Oktar's message was that evolutionary theory was at the root of all modern ills. Materialism, atheism, communism, terrorism, the British deep state, global Freemasonry, Satanism, or anything else that could be added to that list. He had a team of people gleaning information from American creationists and their ilk and collating it to publish in a picture textbook format under the sobriquet of what Harun Yahya, pen name of Harun Yahya. Now, just to clarify some of that, what we covered in Islam Answers Atheism is that creationism, which is the belief that the world does not go back more than 7,000 years, an ideology that is found among some Christians. Some Muslims adopt it, but it has no basis in Islam. If there are Muslim ulama that mention the earth is only 7,000 years old, it is based upon what we refer to as Israeliyat, Israelite reports. Why Harun Yahya became popular? Because he was viewed as one of the first people to have countered atheist ideology. But in reality, what he was doing was copying and pasting from the Discovery Institute. The Discovery Institute was more original. He was copying and pasting from their works, perhaps rewording some of their research and regurgitating that into the English language, into the Turkish language, in Arabic and numerous other languages. This led to his popularity. So, for instance, on page 50, I mentioned books like The Evolution Deceit were well received by many Muslims as an appropriate response to evolutionary science. which in terms of human origins may be deemed as unbelief. It is unbelief to believe that Sayyiduna Adam alayhi salam descended from inferior creatures prior to him. We covered this in Islam Answers Atheism. So his books were well received, and I mentioned some of his history, but what had happened is that Oktar had actually grown up in a secular family and was only exposed to religious teachings at university during the 1970s. So his upbringing was secular, as many Turks today are in fact atheist and secular. Although influenced by Saeed Nursi's teachings, he was not accepted by traditional Jama'at Nur. Now the Jama'at Nur is the group of Shaykh Saeed Nursi, nor by the particular offshoots of Fathullah Gulen. By profession, Oktar was an interior designer, having had no religious education. Note how this parallels with Juhayman al-Otaybi. Juhayman al-Otaybi had no formal education in the deen of Allah, and certainly not recognized by the traditional Sunni scholars as a religious authority. In 1986, Oktar was arrested on charges of making propaganda with the aim of weakening or destroying national sentiments. We know how nationalistic the Turks, the secular Turks, can be. They arrested him, and later on he was found in the criminal ward, where he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Now, during confinement, he met a Quranist. Who are these so-called Quranists? People who reject the Sunnah and Hadith. This Quranist attempted to indoctrinate Oktar even further. Adnan Oktar did adopt some of the so-called Quranist teachings, abandoning the Sunnah when it suited him. But the Quranist whom he met did mention later that members of the cult would complain to him with regard to the behavior, the inappropriate behavior of Harun Yahya. Now, Harun Yahya was arrested later, but what I mentioned on page 53, what is more poignant to our discussion is the most bizarre teachings of Oktar were regarding Jerusalem, the Aqsa Mosque, Freemasonry, Zionism, the Mahdi, and what he termed the British deep state. In the 1990s, his book Holocaust Deception depicted the secret history of the Zionist-Nazi collaboration and the true story of the Jewish Holocaust. This book was criticized by the Zionist lobby in Turkey and yet applauded by others. Strangely, after the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks, Oktar completely revised such type of view in an attempt to appease different groups. So he did appease the Zionists later and associated with them. He then published the work Holocaust Violence, taking the contrary view to his earlier book, even denying having written the earlier work despite references made to it elsewhere, and the fact that the book had a registered ISBN number for the year 1995. So he had in fact published that work, Holocaust Hoax. In fact, I remember the book being advertised in 1999, where Adnan Oktar had written a book, Holocaust Hoax, claiming the Holocaust was a hoax. But after 9/11, after the September the 11th attacks, he changed his position. If his idiosyncratic behavior was not enough, in the years after writing Holocaust Violence, He claimed that the Mahdi and the Jewish Messiah were one and the same. Oktar, by this time a Freemason and an honorary Grand Master. So remember, he wrote books against Freemasonry, but then became an open Freemason. Argued that the Jews should be permitted to build a temple on the Aqsa Mosque site and supported Israeli defensive methods. So-called Israeli, as you can see, I placed that in speech marks. This was all carried out alongside the misinterpreting of numerous ahadith on the Mahdi and the end times. So this is how he shifted. But note how he also shifted in how he interpreted the signs regarding Al-Imam al-Mahdi. Eventually he was imprisoned. A prison term of 1,075 years was handed down to him by the judge. 1,075 years, of course, he will die in jail. After this, we come to a third case study. This third case study is relevant to us here in England now, because this cult has moved and migrated to England recently. And this person has claimed himself as being a prophet of God, as well as the Mahdi, as well as the Pope, and a host of other things. This is the cult of Abdullah Hashim, which is based now in the Crewe area near Manchester. So on page 55, what I write with regard to some of the history of Abdullah Hashim is that he is an American filmmaker of mixed Egyptian and European ancestry. He studied filmmaking and took a deep interest in claimants of prophethood and advocated conspiracy theories regarding the establishment, Hollywood filmmakers and actors. Now note here, initially he was against false prophets. So he claimed he's going after false prophets and making documentaries exposing them. Some of his early investigative journalism was to investigate the cult of Raïl. The cult of Raïl is a cult based in France, an alien cult similar to the cult of Osho. Raïl, also known as Claude Maurice Marcel Varilhan, founded his own religion. The Raëlian movement, this Raëlian movement, I remember many years ago, was in mainstream newspapers for having claimed that they have made the first human clone. They claimed they have made the first human clone. Of course, none of that was substantiated. Raïl centered his cult around UFOs and belief in intelligent alien beings. Born in 1946 in France, Raïl was a journalist and taxi driver for many years until, as he claims, he had an encounter with an extraterrestrial being in December 1973, whom he called Yahweh. Since then, Raïl has preached a doctrine centered around his experience with this purported alien being. Now that's just a summary of the group that Abdullah Hashim chased after. He made a documentary. The documentary, short documentary, was featured on Fox News, and it was even uploaded on YouTube. But later, it was taken down. Why? Because Abdullah Hashim made false claims regarding the Raëlian group. This is what I mentioned on page 56. However, on 15th September 2011, a Californian federal court judgment against Hashim ordered him to return all film footage taken at the seminar to the Raëlian movement. So that documentary was found to have false information. He also followed an African American known as so-called Prophet Yahweh, not to be confused with another cult leader known as Yahweh ben Yahweh. There's another American cult leader known as Yahweh ben Yahweh who founded a cult which, interestingly, they wear Muslim garbs, white thobes, white turbans that look like imama. They look like Muslims, Yahweh ben Yahweh. But it should not be confused with that. This man referred to himself as Prophet Yahweh, na'udhu billah. He's died now. Who claimed to be able to summon UFOs for people, and that UFOs had contacted all the biblical prophets. Abdullah Hashim claimed to have traveled the entire USA to gain information on the Dajjal system from insiders of the Raelian cult. So initially, even Abdullah Hashim is claiming he's exposing the Dajjal system. So this is someone who is claiming he has exposed the Dajjal system. But what it turns out, we will see what a rabbit hole he led his followers down. In 2007 and 2008, he made a series on YouTube entitled The Antichrist Dajjal Will Be a Reptilian Shapeshifter. A series consisting of 10-minute long videos with information regarding ancient Egypt, the occult, Satanism, occultism, magic, conspiracy theories, Hollywood and movie references, and of course citations from religious texts, including Quran and hadith. The idea that the Dajjal will be a reptilian shapeshifter is taken from David Icke. So it's not an original idea, it's from David Icke, who took it from South African shamans and sages and the like, such as Vasamazulu Credo Matwa. Now this Credo Matwa was a South African shaman. The idea of reptilian shapeshifters is likened to our Islamic belief in jinn. Now the question is this a correct analogy? The answer is no, because a false analogy, as generally Muslims do not believe that certain people, such as the British royal family, are shape-shifting reptilians who drink blood to maintain human-like appearance. That is what they believe. They believe the royal family are shape-shifting reptilians that drink human blood to maintain a human look, and they are in fact reptilians. Now, of course, anyone who just observes Prince Andrew will know that they are not reptilians. Whether a person is a demonic human being is different to being a reptilian shapeshifter. Abdullah Hashim's work was also influenced by the likes of Sheikh Imran Hussein, Jordan Maxwell, and other well-known conspiracy theorists. We will cover Imran Hussein later, but this is important to note that what made this series especially addictive was the captivating background music and frightening theme running through the entire series that proposed that the Dajjal was a reptilian being who controlled the affairs of the world, and that the world rulers in their turn worshipped the jinn. So that's captivating for a young Muslim to watch this. After creating hundreds of episodes, the entire series was removed from YouTube, supposedly for copyright infringements, or as Hashim's followers claimed, for other ulterior motives. The reality was the videos were removed because of copyright infringements. He was utilizing the music from the movies and scenes from different films. Of course, this is a good way of brainwashing people who are watching the documentary. The addiction of his subscribers lay in his intertwining conspiracy theory, entertaining footage from popular movies, emotive music, frightening concepts, and claims made with hadith narrations pertaining to end times, as well as the appearance of the Mahdi and Dajjal. These short conspiracy videos became a source of dopamine. A source of dopamine. And in the absence of genuine knowledge from authentic scholars regarding the end of time, were perceived as being true. So people have no real knowledge of Ashratul Sa'ah. They watch and observe these short videos on YouTube, and they have a dopamine rush from them. These videos inspired a number of infamous YouTube conspiracy videos. The series The Arrivals became so popular that it was even televised on the AIY digital channel in Pakistan. The team behind The Arrivals were also Shia, and like Hashim, used footage from movies